So many attempts at gambling recovery fail. It's the same with almost any kind of addiction. Most people who do actually get into any form of lasting recovery will have had many failed attempts at getting into recovery and abstaining from said behaviour. In this video, obviously, I'm going to talk about gambling, but this will apply to anyone suffering from addictions of almost any kind or a negative behaviour of almost any kind. The reason I believe that so many attempts at recovery fail is because we don't acknowledge that there are indeed two very different steps when it comes to living a gamble-free life. There is quitting, giving up, stopping gambling, and then there is maintaining recovery. And the motives and the methods by which we quit are almost certainly going to be different to the methodology we require when it comes to maintaining a lasting recovery, certainly from a psychological level. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video, and it's certainly the reason I believe retrospectively so many of my attempts to quit this addiction failed within days, most often, of me attempting them. Firstly, just want to say hi, hope you're keeping safe, hope you're keeping sane. Thank you for clicking on this video. If you wish to support the channel, there will be a link to my Patreon in the description below. Anyone who signs up there, it really does help. It really does help support the channel, and it's very much appreciated. If you don't wish to do that, that's cool. Just thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe, do all that great YouTubey stuff, and it'd be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. I've spoken before quite a few times about the reasons that we quit gambling. What I'm not going to do in this video is talk too much about either the damage we cause through gambling, because if you're watching this video you'll likely know that, or indeed the multitude of benefits that come from maintaining a lasting recovery, because again, you may already know that, but you might also not want to hear that, particularly if you're at the early stages of recovery, or you've just made the decision to quit, or dare I say you're at a position which you feel to be a perceived rock bottom. You don't want to hear the ramblings of someone who is expressing the benefits that lay for you further down the road. Of course, they may be motivation for you going forward. Yeah, you may want a better life. You may be focusing on the long-term benefits by means as motivation to quit, but that's not going to help you right now. The reasons we quit gambling are, multifarious, shall I say, but the final drive, the final nail in our gambling coffin, the thing that tips us over the edge is normally some sort of negative experience. And just for the sake of argument, let's say that negative experience is a substantial financial loss. And in many of my failed attempts at quitting, a substantial financial loss was the reason I decided I'm not doing this anymore. Okay. With that will often come a significant amount of anger. Certainly it did for me. Anger at whatever form of gambling it was that caused you the loss. The machine was rigged, or, that was unfair, or the dealer gave me the wrong cards, or whatever. Okay, quite often unjustified anger, but also anger at yourself. Anger that you've promised yourself you weren't going to do this, you promised yourself you were only going to have a quick 20 quid, and here you are, and you've done another wage packet, and you're there, and you're angry, and that anger may well last for, a good 24 hours or so, because quite often you'll wake up the next day, and that anger will hit you all over again, and you'll berate yourself, and you will be fired up. And this can manifest itself in one of two ways. The traditional way, which I used to deal with, which was go out and try and chase my losses, or go out and have a particularly destructive day of doing nothing of any benefit, or drinking, or whatever. Okay. The other way, and this is actually a very powerful thing if we can harness it, is we can use that anger as motivation and as drive to help us in our very early stages of recovery, help us to quit. Anger is an incredibly powerful emotion. It's also a very transient emotion. So in the time we are suffering that period of anger at the back of a gambling loss, or it might be an argument with the partner, or it might be a falling out with a friend, or you lost your job, or whatever it is, whatever short-term harm gambling has caused you that has built this emotion within you, if we can harness that real strong emotion and put it into something positive, then it might be something that can help us further down the line. Use that emotion, use that drive you have in the moment to do the practical stuff. Get the blocks in place. Get online. Go to the multi-operator exclusion scheme. There'll be a link in the description below. Go to your local bookies or whatever it is that you choose to gamble and self-exclude. Sign up to GamStop. Again, there'll be a link in the description below. Get onto your credit card or debit card company, bank, and request that gambling transactions be blocked on your card. Now, if you have an app for your banking, there's almost certainly going to be an option within there somewhere that allows you to do that right now. And it's amazing once we harness this anger and this motivation at the early stages, how much of the practical stuff we can get done. Use it as motivation to talk to people. Maybe give GamCare a call. Again, there'll be a number and a link in the description below. Do whatever you can proactively during a period of heightened emotion that's going to ultimately set you up for the biggest chance of success in the early stages of what will hopefully be a sustained recovery. That is stage 1 of a life of no gambling. There is a stage 2, and that is your lasting recovery. Now, the reason that I failed so many times in my recovery is because I relied on the same motivational factors that completed stage 1 successfully to continue my recovery through stage 2, and it simply wouldn't last. Like I say, the anger and all the other heightened emotions that come off the back of harm caused by gambling do subside. I've referred to it before as the gambling hangover, that feeling after a particularly bad period of gambling, be that just financial or be there other mitigating factors as well. That feeling after, that punch in the stomach feeling and that feeling of self-loathing, self-hatred, on this very, very powerful period of emotion, but it does subside. And sometimes it will subside in a few hours. Sometimes it may take a day or 3, but it will subside. And once that period subsides, once that emotion subsides, that driving factor, that motivating factor you had to stop, to quit, to get gambling out of your life, suddenly falls away. And the feelings start to creep back in. Well, maybe 20 quid won't hurt. Maybe I'll just have a quick go. Maybe I'll only gamble at weekends. Maybe I'll only bet on the football. Maybe I'll only do this or this or this. And you start to set yourself rules for gambling rather than realising why you needed to quit or why you wanted to quit in the first place. The second part of recovery is obviously going to be a much more long-term affair. And we can't rely on strong emotions like anger or indeed things like willpower to help sustain it. What we actually need is to do something to replace the void that extracting this toxic, addictive behaviour from our lives has left. If we continue to live our lives in exactly the same way we were before, but just without the gambling or whatever addiction it is being part of it, then there will forever be that hole that the urges in our brain is wishing to fill. We are living the same life, so it goes without saying that the path of least resistance is to continue to live the same life in the same capacity, and that includes putting that gambling back into our lives. And this can come from a very practical place. We spend so much of our lives under addiction, gambling or drinking or doing drugs, that once we take that out of our lives, we have an awful lot of spare time, which is one of the very solid sides of the gambling addiction triangle, or just the addictional triangle in general. So we need to find something to do with this time. Now, I'm not going to go over what I always say, which is you don't need to do anything constructive, which is true. You don't need to go to the gym. You don't need to take up charity work or whatever. You just need to make sure that time is filled. But on a more long-term basis, aside from just distracting ourselves from the urges and the fact that we've got this thing that we now feel we're being deprived of because we've quit. Okay, bear with me, phone call. We need to make a bit of a plan. Someone much wiser than me, someone was listening to a podcast with someone the other day, said, if someone comes up to you and says, what do you want from life? It's very, very easy to say things like happiness, health, load of money, all that sort of stuff. But that isn't a goal, that isn't a target, that isn't a name, that's not a vision. That's just things that we arbitrarily think we might want in the future. We need to actually make a bit of a plan, and it can be a very loose plan, but we need a plan so we can, at least one day at a time, take a step towards a perceived version of ourselves that we would rather be, rather than continue being the same person we are at the moment, just without the gambling. Now, like I say, this doesn't have to be something highfalutin. We don't need to start a multi-million-pound business or marry a supermodel or drive a Lamborghini. We don't need to necessarily aspire to these things, because sometimes actually, if we aspire too high, then what happens is it almost seems inconceivable, and once again that path of least resistance drags us back down into old behaviours. But what we do need to do is think of something we can take practical steps towards almost on a daily basis, that we can take pride in, that we can feel achievement in, but also acts as a long-term distraction from the addiction and gives us a path to walk upon that isn't the path of addiction and self-destruction. Where was I? Who knows? So, like I say, you don't need to put grandiose plans in place. You just need something so it doesn't feel like you're battling every day, to overlook, to distract yourself from, to fill the time with that you'd normally spend gambling with something else, because that's quitting, that's giving up, and you don't want to be giving up. You want to be setting foot on a better path. Set yourself aspirational but not unrealistic goals, because otherwise, what will happen? Like I say, the very things that made you decide to quit in the first place, the emotion, maybe the financial loss, but you'll get paid again. You'll get money come back in again. Something will come up and you'll live. And eventually, all the issues that gambling caused you in the short term will subside, and the gambling demons will tell you that it's safe to go back, and the cycle will repeat and repeat and repeat. We know why we need to quit, but knowing why we need to quit and the things that drive us to quit are not the things that are going to keep us in recovery. The things that will keep us in recovery are long-term aspirations, long-term plans. And dare I just add to that if we look at our lives as a pyramid, and at the top is ultimately our goals, the things we aspire towards, if we put decadence, hedonism, pleasure at the top of that pyramid, then we're always going to be striving for something almost unattainable. Pleasure is something that's always out of reach. It's a carrot on the end of a very, very long stick, because once you reach one level of pleasure, then you'll need greater and greater levels of pleasure and of all the endorphins and dopamine and all that stuff that comes along with it in order to placate the urges. If we instead look for satisfaction, tranquility, security, and things like that at the top of our pyramid, then we'll find not only is that far, far easier to achieve, we'll find that we're not constantly pursuing a ghost. We're not pursuing something that ultimately will only ever sort of set our levels of hedonistic, they call it hedonistic threshold or something like that, higher and higher and higher, in so much as we'll never actually achieve it. Of course, we're always going to have difficulties in life. We're always going to have problems, and we're always going to find issues arise. Even if you have what is perceived to be on the outside an incredibly comfortable life, there will always be things you're challenged with and things you're battling against. But if we aim for tranquility, peace, security, harmony, friendship, love, all those sort of slightly airy-fairy hippie sounding things, but if that's what we go for, calm, peace, happiness, contentment, these are things we should strive for, not the pleasure, not the the mansions, the Lamborghinis and stuff, because whilst that stuff's great, and I certainly wouldn't say no, okay, if you gave me 10 million quid, the fact that I knew that all my rent was going to be paid, all my bills were going to be paid every month, and I didn't need to stress about that, would give me far more pleasure than a neon green Huracan or whatever. All right, although that would be pretty cool. Stay safe, stay sane, everyone. Take care. Speak to you all soon. Patreon link in the description below. Please consider signing up over there to support me, and it's greatly appreciated if you do. All the best.